Welcome back to Thimbleberry U. I'm John Jag Gay. As always, I'm joined by Amy Walls of Thimbleberry Financial. Hello, Amy.
Hi, Jag.
So last episode, we talked about estate planning mistakes and how to avoid them. We've got 10 that we're talking about. We did 5 last time. We're going to do 5 this time. And where we left off last time, we were talking about trust, which is where we'll pick it up from here. What about wrong and unnecessary trusts? What's the problem with using a trust just in case?
Jag, let me answer that in a roundabout way.
Okay.
We have a remodel going on. We're finishing our basement. Mm-hmm. And imagine that, they're putting up one of the walls and needing to use what we'd normally call a hammer, and they don't have it, and they tried doing it with a screwdriver.
Okay.
The hammer and the screwdriver serve different purposes. They're tools, right? And, you laughed because obviously you're not going to put up a wall with a screwdriver.
I'm laughing again.
So estate planning vehicles, trust being one of them, are tools. And if you don't know what problem you're solving, the tool you choose might hurt more than help.
Yeah.
So it's about being intentional. Something we talk about regularly. What problem are we looking to solve, and what's the right tool to do so? Just assuming a trust isn't necessarily accurate. And there's also lots of different trusts that do lots of different things. Some people use complex tax planning trusts when their estate isn't taxable.
Oof.
Okay, some of that depends on what state you live in, too. Some states have a very low estate tax threshold, while others it's much higher. Mm-hmm. Some people might only worry about the federal estate tax and not think about their state estate tax, which here in Oregon, it's $1 million. It's one of the lowest. So other people will skip trusts they actually need, for example, when protecting minors or vulnerable beneficiaries. So it's all about what problem can be identified in your situation. And do you agree it needs to be solved? And then you start applying the tools.
And you need to talk to a professional who understands this stuff. Don't use a trust when you don't need it. Don't skip a trust when you do need it.
And don't forget to fund it.
Yes, we talked about that last time.
Yes.
All right, next on our list, conflicting or confusing instructions. Can you give me an example of how things might go sideways in this regard?
Yeah, let's take a will. Maybe the will says divide everything fairly. And there's also a trust. And the trust says divide everything equally.
Those are two very different terms, fairly and equally.
Yep. And then IRA names just one of 3 children.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, obviously, if listeners haven't listened to our last episode, they probably should. But the IRA beneficiary designation is going to trump whatever the will or the trust says. So that one child listed there is going to get everything. This one's also hard because we've often heard people say, well, it's okay if I just name one child. They will be responsible for handing everything out to their siblings.
No, that's a big mistake.
That doesn't work either, and it puts a tax burden on them, and that's going to create lots of issues. So that is confusing or conflicting instructions also, because maybe a conversation happens with all 3 children, and it's you guys all get this equally, and then one child's named. Well, the other 2 children probably have an expectation they're going to split that, but they've been stuck in a really bad position to do that.
Yeah, and that one child is being given the tax burden and the emotional burden at the same time.
Exactly. They've been set up to not win with their siblings. So, right. But going back to what you said, the will says divide everything fairly and the trust says divide everything equally. Those are vague instructions. They don't match. And this is where families wind up confused, upset, or even in court.
Equally could be math. Fairly is very subjective. Maybe one child is very successful financially and one child is having a hard time making ends meet. And then that becomes what's fair. There's not a legal definition of that. It's totally subjective.
Yes, you are absolutely correct.
All right, next on our list is ignoring taxes. And this often doesn't mean any malice. It just might mean someone's not educated. Do most people even realize how taxes show up in estate planning?
I'm going to say most often not.
Yeah.
Inherited IRAs, for example, create taxable income. Investment gains have the potential for capital gains, but often can be avoided. It depends. Large estates, or even in some of the states like Oregon with a lower estate tax threshold, it's possible estate tax. So planning doesn't eliminate tax, whether financial planning or estate planning doesn't eliminate tax, but it does help avoid surprises. And that's important to know.
Got it.
Because taxes come in multiple ways.
We've covered that in many episodes of this podcast.
Yes.
All right. Overlooking digital assets, something we've also talked about in previous episodes. What kinds of things count as digital assets when we're talking about estate planning?
First, there's a list, and this is so often overlooked. Crypto would be one. Cloud photo storage.
Okay.
Password managers. Email accounts. And here's the problem with these. If no one knows how to access them, they may as well be gone. So it's not just who gets these things, but does anyone know how to get at what's inside of them?
We've talked about password managers and the ability to have in case of emergency contact, sort of a beneficiary designation, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned photos too, because you don't think of that as an asset having a financial number tied to it. But my guess is if you've got all these great pictures from over the years, family, friends, you would probably want those to go into somebody else's possession to have going forward.
Absolutely. You know, we are about to go on a trip and we were going to print some photos. And it occurred to me that other than this book I made for my 17-year-old when they were 4, they have no printed photos.
Interesting.
Like we have no printed photos that they would have access to. So if my husband and I passed away, they're without any visual childhood memories.
Wow. That's quite the statement to think about.
Yeah, and I think about, I used to love as a kid going through my parents' photo albums and, we had this big box with photos and, whether I knew who the people were or not, I could recognize my parents and that was fun and, my brother and I, and there's a whole history that's going to be lost if those aren't passed forward.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. There were a lot of slides of my wife as a kid.
We're dating ourselves.
Yes, I know. But there were no slides of her brother. Her brother had pictures and she had the slides. He's 4 or 5 years younger than her. So it's funny how you only took pictures of me. You only took pictures of him. Nope, just different media formats. I will put a plug in here. There are a lot of companies that will digitize, whether it's cassette tapes, VHS tapes, slides, prints, things like that. And maybe if you don't want to have that shoebox to move from house to house or that big crate of all these stuff, having the printed stuff is great to your point, Amy, but if you want something that's a little bit more portable, there are ways to digitize all of these things. And a lot of that physical media will degrade over time. So sometimes it's good to have a digital copy.
Absolutely.
All right, final thing on our list, choosing the wrong fiduciary. I feel like this could be its own podcast. These are the people that are carrying out your wishes, right?
Yes. And this is such a big topic. I think I'll have to put it on a list for a future podcast topic since you said that. Too often, I think people are chosen based on guilt, birth order, or assumptions.
What do you mean by guilt? Let me stop you there.
Let's say you have 3 children and you need to name a fiduciary. You need to name someone to take care of settling your estate, whether you have a will or a trust. And most people, when they have kids, you're going to think of, okay, I choose from my children on this. They're likely to outlive me. They're going to be in a position to handle this. I need to pick the first one just so this goes to birth order, but I think it fits. Just because if I overlook them and I pick the third, both my first and second are going to be hurt and think I don't care about them. Well, they might, but the reality is this is a job. Settling an estate is a job. It's not honors. It's not giving them a big ribbon of you're my favorite. And you want to pick someone who's organized, steady, trustworthy, and willing to serve in this capacity. If you're picking your firstborn, for example, because that seems like the easy way to go, and that person doesn't balance their checkbook, they don't check their mail, on a regular basis, those sorts of things, that is not the person to fill this role.
I'm thinking of a family member who was 3rd of 4 in her birth order. And she was made in charge of the estate by her parents when they passed. And there were some hurt feelings, but the parents knew that she was the one of the 4 best equipped to handle it. So that's a great point.
Yes. An example of maybe a place where maybe a different child could be chosen is, this is a real story. Someone I know chose their adult son as trustee because he was the eldest.
Yeah.
But he worked 70 hours a week. He lived out of state and he hated doing paperwork.
Oh, jeez.
His younger sister lived there where the parents lived, handled all the family logistics already. She wasn't even listed as a backup. So this plan looked great, if you will, on paper, but it didn't work in practice when you actually dug into it.
I will say, because it is quite a job to handle an estate, I am one of two. I have a younger brother. My brother is better at business than I am. I'm the social one. He's the business acumen one. And my parents put him in charge for when the time comes because he's better with this stuff than I am. And I am not upset about it because it is not my job. Amy, before we wrap up, I'm going to do a quick recap of the 10 estate planning pitfalls we covered in the last episode. And today they are not having a will, outdated documents, bad beneficiary designations, unfunded trusts, no planning for incapacity, wrong or unnecessary trusts, conflicting or vague instructions, ignoring or not knowing about taxes, overlooking digital assets, and as we just talked about, choosing the wrong fiduciaries. If somebody listening wants to talk to you and your team at Thimbleberry Financial about anything related to estate planning or their financial future in general, what are the best ways to find you?
They can give us a call at 503-610-6510 or find us online at thimbleberryfinancial.com.
Great stuff, Amy. We'll talk again soon.
Sounds good, Jag.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Thimbleberry Financial are not affiliated. Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Thimbleberry Financial are not affiliated.